야, 근데 왜 너 혼자 다 집어서 말하겠어? 그래서 아까 지금 사실 들어오신 거죠? 네. 그럼 생각할 거 아니죠? 아니라고 쓰세요. 아까 왜 말하는 거예요?
Today's case has been a hot news in South Korea, where a murderer father and daughter duo has been released from prison 15 years later, as they have been granted a new trial. And getting a new trial after an appeal trial is said to be one of the rarest things that could happen. Originally, the investigators swore that they were the suspects of the rice wine murder case, but their interrogation tapes have been released to the public, and it showed how ruthless the police and prosecutors were, almost coercing them to a false confession. So who was the real murderer that put the poison in the rice wine? Why did the prosecutors push so hard to put these two behind bars? And why did these two falsely confess if they didn't do it? I mean, talking about protecting your identity and standing up for yourself, did you know that every time you are on the internet or going to any websites or doing any online shoppings, your data is probably leaked somewhere in the dark web? Just do a quick Google search of your name and your emails and you will be surprised how much of your information is leaked online, including your name, phone numbers. No wonder I get so much spams. And which is why I've been using Aura for a year now, who is a sponsor and the supporter of GRAZY TV channel. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up these information will reduce the amount of spams that you get, potential identity theft of your sensitive information like bank accounts, passwords, and other sensitive information. Aura just doesn't do identity and credit monitoring. They also do password manager, antivirus protections, VPN, and so much more, all for a low price. So I value my privacy whenever I'm on the internet, and you should as well. So you can go to aura.com/grazytv and you can try Aura for 2 weeks free, just to see how much of your information might be leaked even on the dark web. Everything is linked down below, and just by checking out the sponsors, you know, greatly helps to continue running this channel. Thank you so much to Aura, and let's get back to today's video. We're gonna go back to 2009 to Suncheon City in South Korea. And a small family lived in a very rural town. And I'm guessing this is not the city. Apparently there's only like very few buses that actually go out to the city. People weren't really up to date on the modern, trends and styles, stuff like that over there. A lot of farms and land, and people live in houses like this still over there, which is like the old traditional house kind of like, where you even have like bathrooms separately outside of the actual house. People work in small factories, ride bicycles, so you see what kind of lifestyle that these people might have lived. Now, in the early morning of July 6, 2009, around 5:30 a.m., a man named Mr. Beck, who was 60 years old at the time, got out of his house and decided to use the bathroom to get ready for work. Again, he was one of the families that lived in that old Korean house with the main house here, not so fancy bathroom outside. It's very cold in the mornings. By the way, he was living with his wife and his youngest daughter. They had 3 other children. Older children who were older, went out, were married. At this time, they were a family of 3. Mr. Beck claims that as he came out of the bathroom, that's when he noticed a black plastic bag with 2 bottles of Korean rice wine inside. It was right behind of his truck, and I guess it was kind of an open area. I'm not sure if they had a gate, but in small towns like this, like people kind of leave their gate open. There is not that much robbers or thieves at all, so a lot of people just kind of trust their neighbors. Mr. Beck thought, the neighbors maybe had brought us some treats, and decided to put the black plastic bag in front of their home, and then he left to work. Shortly after, his wife woke up and decided to go to her work as well, and she worked at a small factory in their town. She also thought, a neighbor is being kind, sharing some food and treats, and decided to bring the rice wine to her work to share with her coworkers. It is actually very common in South Korea to share a lot of things. If you receive presents or you decide to go to the supermarket and buy something, sometimes you buy for your neighbors. The wife, Miss Choi, arrived at work and she told everybody, hey, I have some rice wine. Does anybody want a shot? It was early in the morning, but I guess it's a little common thing to share the joy. Everybody's starting off work with the 1 shot of rice wine. It's like a treat for a lot of older people. 3 coworkers decided to join, and she poured 4 shots for herself and 3 other coworkers of the rice wine. And as they saw the shot glass though, they did notice that the rice wine was brown, which should have been the first red flag because Korean rice wines are usually completely white. But the coworkers say that they actually commented saying, whoa, this must be like some rare rice wine maybe made with brown rice. Must be something really fancy and exclusive, and didn't think much of it. And because it is alcohol, I guess it was able to conceal any bad odors. Miss Choi was the one who took the first shot of the rice wine, then the second person, third, and fourth, and before you knew it, all 4 of them, their eyes started to roll, foam in their mouth, and completely went unconscious, every single one of them. They were quickly rushed to the hospital, and ultimately 2 people, including Miss Choi, ended up passing away, and 2 other victims did survive but were in a critical condition. This news became really big in South Korea to have 4 people drink common rice wines and almost die. Now everybody in South Korea became worried, like, oh my gosh, should I not be drinking this? Was it tarnished from the factory? But after investigation, they found that one of the rice wine bottle were tarnished with poison cyanide. According to professionals, this is very deadly even in a small amount, but they found a large amount of the substance in there. So this clearly meant that somebody purposely wanted to poison somebody. Of course, the person who actually brought the rice wine, Miss Choi, passed away, so she couldn't have been the suspect, and the next closest one would be her family. The youngest daughter, 26-year-old Ka-young, and her husband, Mr. Beck. Police went through everything from their phone records, credit card records, bank statements, and never found any evidence that they purchased actually the rice wine or the substance. But 50 days into the investigation, in the news, police claimed that the 26-year-old daughter first confessed that she was the one who planted the substance and decided to murder her own mother. The news also stated that the daughter confessed that the father was also in it as well.
아빠가 본인도 죽일 이유가 있었을 텐데.
그래도 먼저 아빠가 먼저 얘기했는데 나도 먼저 엄마한테 야단하는 것도 있고 많이 좀 혼이 나가지고.
The story was even more shocking because the daughter claimed that the reason why she did this was because her father has been SA assaulting her since she was young. Her mother recently found out and she was afraid of getting in trouble, and she was manipulated by her father and decided to wipe her mother out. A really odd information that I have to add here is that shortly after the July 6th incident of the victims passing away, Ka-young, the youngest daughter, she would report a neighborhood man to the police of S assaulting her. So she would sue this neighborhood man, and we don't really know much about who actually is, but it is someone that lived in the same town. But on September 9th, she actually asked the police to cancel her suing this man. Back in 2009, you were able to cancel criminal charges, especially if it was like assault related. You can't do that now, but you were able to cancel and say, hey, I don't want this guy to get punishment. And she claims that she sued this man because she needed somebody to take the blame. We'll get back to this in a bit. But oddly, during the first trial, the father-daughter duo would refute their claim, saying that no, I didn't do it. And with no actual physical evidence and their confessions and the trials not matching up, the judges did rule for now that they were not guilty. Now, this is the overall timeline the prosecutors claim that happened. They claim that the daughter convinced the father to end the life of their mother due to finding out about the abuse claims. They both discussed how they wanted to go about this, and the prosecutors claim that July 2nd, Mr. Beck bought 3 rice wine bottles. Then on July 4th, Mr. Beck apparently had a 17-year-old of that substance that they put into the rice wine that he kept inside of their house for 17 years, and the daughter decided to put the substance inside of the rice wine bottles. Then they would plant the bottles on July 6th in the morning, and the rest is history of how it happened. The prosecutors claim that Mr. Beck bought the rice wine bottles from a nearby city town about 30-40 minutes away from their actual house at a restaurant. But strangely, the restaurant owners claim when they were being investigated that they don't sell the size of the bottles that was actually used in the murder weapon. The poisoned rice wine was inside of a 750 milliliter bottle, but in the restaurant they only sell the 900 milliliter bottle. But in the actual court papers, the prosecutors wrote that they went to the restaurant and did find 750 milliliter bottle. Although the restaurant till this day claimed that that one 700 milliliter bottle that they found was for their own family, for their own co-workers that worked there, so that after work they can have a little drink, and never have sold that to customers. Next, originally Ka-young, the daughter, claimed that she purchased the substance herself online at her house, but prosecutors went to her house and they had no computer, they had no internet. So strangely enough, Ka-young changed her story again, stating that, oh, I went to a nearby library and purchased it there. But police never went to that PC room and never submitted any records to the court stating that she did look this up, because that is an easy thing to find, right? Because they didn't have those records, they changed the statements again, and prosecutors claimed that, oh, it was actually Mr. Beck. He was the one who bought the substance 4 to 5 years ago from a neighborhood man who worked at a bike repair shop. But we find out that the bike shop owner that they were pointing the fingers to, he actually died 13 years ago. So how could the prosecutors claim that Mr. Beck purchased it if the owner was dead? That's when the prosecutors claimed that Mr. Beck changed magically his statements again, saying, oh, I actually purchased this 17 years ago from the bike repair man. And he just magically kept the substance for 17 years inside of his house. Another strange timeline, the exact time that the prosecutors claimed that Ka-young was putting the substance inside of the rice wine bottle, her phone records show that she was on her phone. She was actually checking her internet banking, online banking. So could it be that she was planting the thing inside of the rice wine bottle at the same time on her phone? And how could it be that the prosecutors claiming that she was planting the bottle, she was actually found on CCTV being inside of a bus on her phone? Now remember, first trial they were found not guilty, but the prosecutors appealed and said, we're gonna make this happen. Getting ready for a new trial, prosecutors submitted new evidence. And this time they submitted Ka-young's bed sheets and her underwear. And putting it to DNA tests, prosecutors claimed that yes, there was Mr. Beck's DNA found on her underwear and in her sheets. But it did not specify that it was any type of DNA. When it comes to assault claims, you need a specific semen samples instead of just regular DNA, because they were a family and a lot of the times you do laundry together. And if the father, which in my case as well, my dad and my parents sometimes fold my laundry for me. So it is common to find DNA. So it has to be a certain type actual male substance that has to be found to be enough evidence. But the prosecutors were trying to push this very hard, that this was evidence that the father was abusing the daughter for years. Not to mention the actual poison substance was never found inside of Mr. Beck's house. In a turn of events in 2011, in the second appeal trial, the judges did rule that the father-daughter duo were guilty of murdering 2 people, and the father sentenced to life in prison, while the daughter, Ka-young, was sentenced to 20 years. Although now they were officially sentenced into prison, the father-daughter duo were like, no, that was a false confession. We are actually innocent. Now later on, we find out that the daughter Ka-young, who was only in her 20s at the time, had a very low IQ. She had an IQ of 74 and known to have an intellectual disability. Now professor clarified that someone with this low IQ and intellectual disability, of course you can do everyday activities and things like that, but they do lack the capability to multitask or more easily being able to be manipulated, and that it is unfair to go about a normal interrogation because for them, they might do something crazy like confess to something they didn't do from fear. So what the heck happened here? First of all, witnesses claimed that during the funeral of their mother, this is what they heard. The family, Mr. Beck and all his children, older children, came to the funeral to decide and talk about who might have done this. And the oldest daughter of Mr. Beck and Miss Choi, the deceased, she actually said, you know what guys, I do have a confession to make. Did you know that a neighborhood man, he actually assaulted me when we were younger? The older daughter then asked Ka-young, who was still living in that town, hey, did this guy do anything to you? And she said yes. Mr. A actually did assault me when I was younger. And that is when the family helped Ka-young to sue Mr. A for assault, thinking that he might be the suspect. Only years later, when the media caught the attention of the story, that is when the shocking interrogation tapes were released to the public. In these first interrogation tapes with Ka-young, she actually did a lie detector test. She passed a test that said, you know, I didn't do this to my mom. But in these tapes, the prosecutor is telling Ka-young,
너 거짓말 탐지까지 했구나. 나 추가했지. 어떻게 그런 비법 있어? 한번 써먹게. 알려주던 아빠가 이렇게 거짓말 통과하는 방법.
In another interrogation tape, the prosecutor said, did your dad assault you? Ka-young said, no.
아빠가 너 성추행한 거야? 아빠 안 그랬어? 아빠 안 그랬다고 어떡해? 야? 근데 왜 너 혼자 다 집어서 말하겠어? 응? 왜 그랬어?
You said you purchased the substance online, right? In a frail voice, Ka-young says, no, I never said that. Prosecutor, but your dad said you did. He's telling on you. You know why? Because he's trying to put the blame on you, so you go to prison. Mr. Beck has never said that in his interrogation. So this was all made up. It was a deception to try and, quote, test the little girl. The crazy part is they went through a reenactment after they, quote unquote, confessed. And in this reenactment, Ka-young actually says, I threw the rest of the substance away in the river. There was so much water due to rain. And the prosecutor is standing there like, oh yeah, that's right. There was so much rain, right? And she's just like, yeah.
아, 비가 많이 와서 물이 이렇게 많이 이렇게 흘렀대요?
It's even worse listening to Mr. Beck's interrogation tapes because you can tell that the prosecutors are being very, very intimidating and almost very mean.
똑바로 안 잡아봐요. 말하고 막 나오는 게 아니고 좀 생각을 해서 생각을 좀 해보세요. 왜 거짓말했어?
At one interrogation tape, Mr. Beck was saying no to a lot of the question, and the prosecutor said, okay, let's go on a lunch break.
거짓말을 이렇게 막 밥 먹듯이 해요? 네?
그거야 아닙니다. 제가 안 하기 때문에 그렇습니다.
네?
제가 안 하기 때문에 막걸리도 안 샀습니다.
저가는?
그것도 없었습니다.
But the tapes start 3 hours since the lunch break. I mean, that's a long lunch break, right? And only after they came back, Mr. Beck changed his attitude and started to say yes and confess to a lot of the same questions again.
그리고 차가 좋을 때까지 그 사이에 아까 진술하신 거 있잖아요. 그래서 아까 진술 사실대로 오신 거죠? 네.
So what happened in those missing 3 hours? The prosecutors are not supposed to talk to you off camera. So could it be that maybe Mr. Beck was like really intimidated psychologically?
무슨 막걸리? 백만 막걸리?
네.
한 병을 차 함께 먹고 두 병은 냉장고에 보관 있다가 그 다음날 그 다음날이 2005년 7월 3일
I've told you guys that I've been interrogated by the South Korean police as well a couple of times, and it was intimidating for me. And I'm like, I think I have a pretty hard mentality, but it could get intimidating and pretty scary because they really ask you straightforward questions. But in the written statements, it is written that Mr. Beck said all of this, that yes, I did do this at this time and murdered my wife, when he actually never said that. So everybody's questioning also, I mean, if these evidences were presented to court, I mean, did the judges not look at this? And we later find out that Mr. Beck also had a learning disability, that he could not read or write very well. And the last crazy evidence that the prosecutors might have planted and made up this entire story is that on August 24th, when Ka-young's aunt was being interviewed by the prosecutors, it's written here that the prosecutors told the aunts that Ka-young and Mr. Beck were the suspects. But prior to August 24th, 24th, Kyoung, the daughter, she never even mentioned her father being involved. So how could it be that the prosecutors already knew this information when Kyoung never confessed? Again, this whole story, because they didn't have much physical evidence, was solely based on Kyoung's first confession. So the question is why? Why would the prosecutors make things up and not wanting to put the real suspect behind bars? There are several reasons for this. And if they win a case, I believe more cases that they win and put people behind bars, they are able to get a big promotion. And we'll get to later what these prosecutors that was in charge of these cases are doing today, and it will shock you. Mr. Beck in prison pleaded with the media, claiming that he told the officers who he think has done it, who was a suspect. And apparently prosecutors even kind of laughed this off, even saying crazy stuff like to Mr. A, the potential real suspect, "You should hit Mr. Beck in the face because he's trying to put the blame on you." And saying mean things to Mr. Beck like, "You lived your life, you're 60, go into prison and just repent." So since 2011 till 2024, 15 years they've been sitting in prison pleading for help. And only very recently, actually a week ago since filming this video, they've been released and granted a new trial, which is again very rare thing to happen. Lawyer Park says that this is the case of prosecutors unfairly and illegally making stories up to frame a disabled family for their own promotion benefits. The story doesn't end here because technically they have to go through a new trial. They're temporarily released from prison until this trial, which we will all stay tuned and I'll let you guys know any updates. But Mr. Beck is in his 70s now. He was only 60 years old when he went in, and Miss Kyoung, who was only in her 20s, she's in her 40s now. Kyoung in prison, she claimed that she had to confess because the prosecutors were being so intimidating. And again, with that intellectual disability, it was so much easier, I guess, for her to bend to other people's rules and fears. She also said that she felt so bad for her father because she knows that he's a great man, but she feels that she's responsible for putting him behind bars. Now, in today, what are these prosecutors and these people that put them behind bars planting these false evidence are doing? Some of the prosecutors became politicians, higher position in the legal system. Some of them became lawyers, and according to these sources, they've been living a great promotional life. Meaning, if they did this to these people in this case, I mean, these prosecutors who put many people and won probably many cases, who knows how many more innocent victims are inside sitting in prison right now because of these bad apples. How do you do that? How do you just use someone's innocence and put people behind bars for life, knowing that your story doesn't match up? How do you do that? I just don't get it. The main question is, I mean, who is the real suspect? Or could it be that Mr. A, the man in question, he didn't want the assaults to be exposed and go to jail, and he just kind of felt angry, and out of revenge, he wanted to poison the entire family? If so, I mean, how are they even gonna find evidence 15 years later? Even when people are intimidating you, you guys, again, like I said, I've been in police questioning and I cried afterwards because they can be very intimidating. But you really have to stand up for yourself and say no to the things you didn't do. And one of the reasons why you do need a lawyer, and I don't think they've gotten that as well. Anyway, let me know what you guys have thought about today's case. Thank you to Ara for supporting today's video, and see you in my next case.